I'm Iris, 32 years old. 10 years ago, on the rainiest night of the year, my father threw me out of his house with a torn suitcase and $47 in my pocket. Not because I'd done anything wrong, but because I dared to ask him for what my brother received without question: college tuition. From that night forward, my father told everyone who would listen that I was mentally unstable, that I couldn't hold down a job, that the family had tried everything, but I refused treatment. For 10 years, I stayed silent. For 10 years, I built my career from nothing, while he built an elaborate lie about who I was. Then one day, I was nominated for the biggest award in my industry, broadcast live to hundreds of thousands of viewers. When they called my name and I walked up to that stage, I knew exactly what I was going to say. And my father? He was watching, surrounded by every single person he'd spent a decade lying to. Before I tell you what happened next, if this story resonates with you, take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely want to hear how it ends. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from right now? What time is it there? I'm always curious to know which corners of the world are listening. Now let me take you back to 10 years ago, the night that changed everything. The rain was coming down so hard I could barely see 3 feet in front of me. I stood on the front porch of my parents' house in Connecticut, my grandmother's old suitcase at my feet, its zipper broken from where I'd stuffed my clothes in too fast. Through the beveled glass of the front door, I could see the chandelier in the foyer, the Waterford crystal one my mother had picked out for their 25th anniversary. It was still glowing warm and golden, but the deadbolt had already clicked into place. 30 minutes earlier, I'd been inside that house, surrounded by 32 members of my extended family, celebrating my grandfather's 80th birthday. 30 minutes earlier, I'd still believed that if I just asked the right way, my father might finally see me as worthy of the same investment he'd made in my brother. I was wrong. Let me rewind 2 hours before I ended up standing in that rain. The party was at Castellano's, my grandfather's favorite Italian restaurant. The kind of place with white tablecloths and waiters who remember your name. My father had rented out the entire back room. 32 place settings. Chianti that cost more per bottle than my weekly grocery budget. A 3-tiered cake from the best bakery in Hartford. I'd driven 4 hours from my apartment near campus to be there. I was 22, in my final semester of undergrad, and I'd just received the letter that was supposed to change my life. Acceptance into one of the top architecture programs in the country. Full curriculum. $45,000 a year. I'd rehearsed what I was going to say to my father for weeks. I'd chosen this moment carefully, surrounded by family, a celebratory atmosphere. I thought he'd be in a good mood. I thought the presence of witnesses might make him more reasonable. I was so naive. I waited until the cake had been cut and coffee was being served. I approached my father quietly, touched his elbow, and asked if we could speak privately for a moment. He turned to look at me, his Rolex catching the light, and smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Whatever you need to say it here," he announced, loud enough for the nearest tables to hear. "We're all family." I should have walked away, but I was 22, and I still believed he might say yes. So I told him about the acceptance, about the program, about how this was my dream, and how I'd worked so hard, and how I was hoping, just hoping, that he might consider helping me the way he'd helped Derek. My brother Derek, 18 years old, was sitting 3 seats away. He'd just gotten a brand new BMW for his birthday. His college tuition, all 4 years of it, had been paid in full before he'd even graduated high school. He'd never had to ask for any of it. My father's expression didn't change. "Help you?" he repeated. "The way I helped Derek?" And then he laughed. What happened next still plays in my mind like a film I can't stop rewatching. My father stood up from his chair and suddenly everyone at the table was looking at us. My aunts, my uncles, my cousins, my grandfather still holding his coffee cup. My mother, her Hermes scarf perfectly arranged, her eyes fixed on her plate. "You think you're entitled to the same thing as your brother?" My father's voice carried across the entire room. "Derek is my son. He's going to carry on this family's name. He's going to build something. And you?" He gestured at me dismissively. "You're a girl. You're going to get married, take someone else's name, and raise their children. Why would I waste money on a degree you'll never use? I felt my face burning. 32 people were staring at me. Dad, I whispered, can we please talk about this in private? There's nothing to talk about. He was louder now, making sure everyone could hear. You want money? Go earn it yourself. Derek never had to beg for anything because Derek knows his place. You? You don't even know what you are. I looked at Derek. He was staring at his phone, pretending not to hear. I looked at my mother. She was rearranging the napkin in her lap. I looked at my grandfather, hoping, praying he might intervene. He'd always been kind to me. He'd always told me I was smart. He cleared his throat. Howard, he said to my father, let's not ruin the party. That was it. That was all he said. My father leaned down close to my ear. His cologne, Tom Ford, $200 a bottle, made me nauseous. I'll email you my reasons, he whispered, so you understand your place in this family. 3 days later, sitting in a rented room that cost $400 a month, I opened that email. The email was worse than anything he'd said out loud. I still remember every word. I've read it so many times over the past decade that it's burned into my memory like a scar. Iris, you were born a girl. That is reality. You don't have the right to demand what belongs to your brother. Derek is the future of this family. You are just something to be given away to another family. Don't contact me again unless you're ready to apologize for humiliating me in front of everyone. I sat on the thin mattress of my rented room, instant ramen growing cold on the desk beside me. And I read those words over and over. My laptop screen blurred. I realized I was crying. My finger hovered over the delete button. But something stopped me. Some instinct I couldn't name at the time. Instead, I clicked Save. I created a folder and named it Evidence. I didn't know what I was saving it for. I just knew I needed proof. Proof that I wasn't crazy. Proof that the things he said were real. A week later, my mother called. She waited until my father was out of the house. I could tell by the way she was whispering, the way she kept pausing to listen for sounds. Iris, honey. Her voice was thick with tears. I love you. You know I love you. And I know what your father did wasn't right. Then why didn't you say anything? I asked. You just sat there, Mom. You didn't say a single word. Silence. You know how your father is, she finally said. If I'd defended you, he would have... I don't have anywhere to go, Iris. I don't have my own money. I don't have... I understand, I said. And I did. I understood that I was completely alone. But my mother did say one thing before she hung up that I didn't fully understand until much later. Iris, she whispered, your father is... He's telling people things. About you. Things that aren't true. I don't know how to stop him. What things? She didn't answer. Just said she loved me and hung up. 2 months later, I found out exactly what she meant. I was studying for finals in my tiny apartment when my phone rang. It was my Aunt Helen, my mother's younger sister. She'd always been warm to me, always snuck me extra dessert at family dinners. Iris, sweetheart, she said, her voice dripping with concern. How are you feeling? Are you getting the help you need? I frowned. Help? What do you mean? Your treatment, honey. Your father told us about your condition. He said you've been struggling since you were young and that's why you left home. He said the family tried everything, but you refused to get better. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of my desk. Aunt Helen, I don't have a condition. I don't know what he told you, but... Oh, honey. Her voice was soothing, the way you'd talk to a frightened child. It's okay. You don't have to be ashamed. Mental illness is nothing to be embarrassed about. We're all praying for you. I called 3 more relatives that night. They'd all heard the same story. My father had been thorough. My cousin Sarah read me a text message from our family group chat, the one I'd been removed from. My father's words, sent to over 40 people. Please don't contact Iris. She's going through a serious mental health crisis. Any stimulation could make things worse. We've tried everything. Just pray for her. That's when I understood. My father wasn't just punishing me for leaving. He was erasing me. I had 2 choices. I could call every single person he'd lied to. I could scream the truth from the rooftops. I could forward them his email, show them what he'd really said, demand they believe me over him. Or I could stay silent. I spent 3 days thinking about it. 3 days of barely eating, barely sleeping, just pacing my $400 room and running through scenarios in my head. If I fought back now, what would happen? I was 22 years old. I had no money, no credentials, no reputation of my own. My father was Howard Mercer, a successful contractor, a member of 3 different charity boards, a man who'd built relationships in our community for 30 years. He had golf buddies who were judges. He had business partners who were city councilmen. Who would believe me? A mentally unstable girl with nothing to her name, accusing her respectable father of lies? I could already see how that would play out. They'd shake their heads sadly. They'd talk about how tragic it was, how the illness had made me delusional. My father would play the suffering parent, and everyone would comfort him for having such a difficult daughter. I couldn't win that fight. Not yet. So I made a different choice. I opened my laptop. I looked at the folder I'd created, the one labeled Evidence. I moved my father's email into it. Then I went back through my phone and screenshotted every text my aunt had read me, every message from relatives expressing their concern. I saved all of it. I didn't know when I'd use it. I didn't know how. I only knew that someday I would have something he didn't have right now. Proof of who I really was. Not his words, my work. And when that day came, I wouldn't need to scream. The truth would speak for itself. I threw myself into work. I took out federal loans for tuition. I applied for every scholarship I could find. I worked 2 part-time jobs, one at a coffee shop from 6 to 10 in the morning, another at a design firm's front desk from 6 to 10 at night. In between, I studied. I slept 4 hours on good nights. My grades didn't slip. If anything, they got better. Turns out there's nothing like rage to fuel productivity. It was during my 2nd year that I met Eleanor Vance. She was a guest lecturer that semester, a legendary figure in the architecture world, 70 years old, with a career spanning 5 decades, and awards covering an entire wall of her office. She'd designed museums in 3 countries. She'd been on the cover of every design magazine that mattered. She'd also been one of the first women to break into a field that told her she didn't belong. After one of her lectures, she stopped me as I was packing up my bag. "You're the one who did the Morrison project, aren't you?" she asked. "The adaptive reuse concept?" I nodded, surprised she even knew my name. It was exceptional. She studied me with sharp gray eyes. "Tell me about your background." I hesitated. I'd gotten good at deflecting this question. "My family doesn't support my career," I finally said. "We're not in contact." Most people would have pressed, asked why, offered sympathy, made it awkward. Eleanor just nodded. "My father told me women shouldn't be architects," she said. "He didn't speak to me for 15 years after I enrolled in school." She handed me a business card. "I have a studio in the city. Come intern for me this summer. No pay, but I'll teach you everything I know." I took the card. "Ms. Vance," I said, "thank you. You have no idea what this means." She smiled. "Actually, I think I do." Eleanor didn't just teach me architecture. She taught me patience, strategy, the long game. "Success is the best response to people who doubt you," she told me once, over coffee in her studio. "Not because it proves them wrong, though it does, but because it proves you right to yourself." I carried those words with me through the next 10 years. Year 1 and 2, I graduated with honors. My father didn't attend. I didn't expect him to. Year 3 through 5, I started as a junior designer at a small firm, making barely enough to cover my student loans. But I worked harder than anyone else. I stayed later. I took on projects no one wanted. My first solo design, a boutique cafe renovation, won a local award. Year 6 through 8. Eleanor recommended me to a prestigious studio in Chicago. I moved across the country with 2 suitcases and a folder full of drawings. Within 18 months, I was senior designer. Within 3 years, I was leading my own team. Year 9 and 10, associate director. My name on projects that got published in national magazines, invitations to speak at conferences, a reputation built entirely on my own work. And through all of it, my father never stopped. Every year, he refined his story. Every year he had new details to share with anyone who asked about his daughter. She's unstable. She can't hold a job. The family tried everything. Such a tragedy. I know because people told me. A former business partner of my father's ran into me at an industry event in Chicago once. He stared at me like he'd seen a ghost. "You're Iris Mercer?" he said. "Howard's daughter? But he told me that you couldn't." "Couldn't what?" I asked calmly. He didn't finish the sentence, but I saw the confusion in his eyes, the first crack in my father's carefully constructed narrative. I smiled and handed him my business card. The wedding invitation arrived in my mailbox on a Tuesday. I was 29 years old. I'd been living in Chicago for 3 years. I had an apartment with actual furniture that I'd picked out myself, a career I was proud of, and a life completely separate from the family I'd left behind. The envelope was thick cream cardstock, my name written in elegant calligraphy. Inside, a formal invitation to the wedding of Derek Michael Mercer and Amanda Louise Patterson. No personal note. No, "We'd love to see you," or "It's been too long." Just my name on a list, the same as any distant acquaintance. I turned the invitation over. The back listed the wedding party. Howard and Margaret Mercer, parents of the groom. That was it. No mention of a sister. My phone buzzed. My mother's name appeared on the screen. She still called me once every few months, always when my father was out of the house, always with the same mix of love and helplessness. "Did you get the invitation?" she asked before I could even say hello. "I did. Will you come?" Her voice was fragile, hopeful. "Please, Iris. It's been so long. I miss you so much." "Mom," I hesitated. "Does he even want me there?" Silence. Then, "Your father doesn't know Derek sent you an invitation. Derek did it on his own, but I want you there. I need to see my daughter." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. "Just please, don't do anything to embarrass your father. Don't make a scene. It's Derek's day." I looked at the invitation in my hand. 7 years of silence, and this was my welcome back. "Come to the party, stay invisible, don't cause trouble." "I'll be there," I said. But I wasn't going to stay invisible. I was going to see, with my own eyes, what my father said about me when he thought I wasn't listening. The wedding was held at the Waverly Country Club, the same one where my father had been a member for 25 years. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings. White roses cascaded from every surface. A string quartet played Vivaldi as 200 guests mingled with champagne flutes in hand. I wore a simple navy dress, elegant but understated. I wasn't there to draw attention. I was there to observe. My father spotted me the moment I walked in. I saw his eyes flick toward me across the room, register my presence, and then, nothing. He turned back to the business associate he was chatting with as if I were a stranger he'd accidentally made eye contact with. For the next 3 hours, he didn't acknowledge me once. I moved through the reception like a ghost. I congratulated Derek and his bride. I hugged my mother, who cried and clutched my hands and whispered, "You look so beautiful," before my father called her name, and she scurried back to his side. I smiled at cousins who looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and pity, and I listened. I positioned myself near my father's table during cocktail hour, close enough to hear, but far enough not to be noticed. A friend of his, a man I didn't recognize, gestured toward me. "Howard, isn't that your daughter, the one who—" "Ah, yes." My father's voice was practiced, smooth. "She's doing a bit better these days, still unstable, but we're hopeful. The doctors say with the right medication." "Such a shame," the friend said. "She seems so normal." "That's the thing about mental illness," my father said gravely. "You can't always tell from the outside." I stood perfectly still, champagne glass in hand, and let his words wash over me. I'd known, intellectually, what he'd been saying, but hearing him lie about me while I was standing 15 feet away, was something else entirely. Then I felt a hand on my elbow. I turned to find Derek. "Iris," he whispered, glancing nervously toward our father. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't know how to make him stop." "Do you believe him?" I asked quietly. "What he says about me?" Derek's eyes dropped to the floor. That was answer enough. Near the end of the reception, my mother found me. The cake had been cut, the bouquet had been thrown, and guests were starting to drift toward the exits. I was standing alone near the garden doors, watching the sun set over the golf course, when I felt her hand slip into mine. "Come with me," she whispered. "Quickly." She led me outside, past the rose garden, to a quiet corner of the terrace where no one could see us. Her hands were trembling as she reached into her clutch and pulled out something small and black. A USB drive. "Take this," she said, pressing it into my palm. "Don't let your father know I gave it to you." I stared at it. "What is this?" "Everything," her voice cracked. "Every email he's sent about you, every text message, every lie he's told to his friends, his partners, our relatives. I copied all of it." "Mom." I couldn't process what she was saying. "How do you even have access to—" "I've known his passwords for years. He doesn't know I know." She laughed bitterly. "He thinks I'm too stupid to figure them out. But I've been watching, Iris. For 10 years, I've been watching what he does to your name, and I—" Her voice broke. "I couldn't stop him. I was too scared. But I could do this." I looked down at the small piece of plastic in my hand. 10 years of lies. 10 years of systematic destruction of my reputation. All documented. "Why now?" I asked. My mother's eyes were wet. "Because I saw his face when you walked in today. He didn't even look at you. His own daughter. And I thought—" She wiped her cheek. "I thought maybe someday you'll be able to use this, to make people see the truth, even if I can't." I hugged her tighter than I had in years. "Thank you, Mom," I whispered. "You have no idea what this means." I didn't open the USB drive until I was back in Chicago 3 days later. I told myself I needed time to prepare. In reality, I was terrified of what I'd find. It was a Sunday night. I poured myself a glass of wine I didn't drink, sat down at my desk, and plugged the drive into my laptop. There were over 50 files, emails, screenshots of text messages, chat logs from the family group that had removed me a decade ago, all organized by date, starting from 2 months after I'd left home. I read them one by one, and with each one, the knife twisted deeper. "Iris is having another episode. Please don't try to contact her directly. It only makes things worse. We've consulted 3 different specialists. They all say the same thing. She refuses treatment. It breaks my heart to say this, but my daughter cannot function in normal society. We've tried everything." And then I found one that made me stop breathing. It was an email sent 5 years ago to a man named Robert Chen. I recognized the name. He was a real estate developer my father had worked with, someone who'd approached me about a major project early in my career. I'd been so excited. It would have been my first big break. The contract had fallen through at the last minute. Robert had said there were budget concerns, and they'd decided to go in a different direction. My father's email to him read, "Robert, I know you're considering hiring my daughter for the Parkview project. I'm telling you this as a friend. Don't. She's not stable. She has serious mental health issues that she refuses to address. If you bring her onto this project, you will regret it. I'm saying this because I care about you and don't want to see your reputation damaged." I closed my laptop and cried until I couldn't breathe. He hadn't just been lying about me. He'd been actively sabotaging my career. A week later, I met Eleanor for lunch. I hadn't told anyone what I'd found on the USB drive. I'd been carrying it around like a grenade, unsure what to do with it. But Eleanor had been the one constant in my professional life for nearly a decade. If anyone could give me perspective, it was her. We sat at her favorite restaurant, a quiet place overlooking Lake Michigan, where the maitre d' knew her by name. I told her everything. The wedding, the lies, the sabotaged project. 10 years of systematic destruction that I'd only now fully understood. Eleanor listened without interrupting. When I finished, she set down her wineglass and looked at me with those sharp gray eyes that had seen everything the industry could throw at a woman. "What do you want to do?" she asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to send everything to every person he's ever lied to. Part of me wants to call him and scream until my throat bleeds. And part of me is so tired of him taking up space in my head." Eleanor nodded slowly. "When I won my first major award," she said, "my father didn't come. He told everyone I'd bought my way onto the jury. He said the only reason a woman could win was if she'd slept her way to the top. She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I could have fought him publicly, made a scene, demanded he retract his lies. What did you do instead? I kept winning. She leaned forward. Iris, the truth doesn't need you to scream it. The truth just needs you to live it. And if you do that well enough, eventually you'll have a stage big enough for everyone to hear. She paused, then added, speaking of which, you're on the shortlist for the IIDA award this year. I'm on the selection committee. I saw your project. My heart stopped. The IIDA? The ceremony is broadcast live, she said. Hundreds of thousands of viewers. She raised her glass. I think your stage might be coming sooner than you think. 6 months later, the email arrived. I was in my office, reviewing floor plans for a boutique hotel in Miami, when my inbox pinged. The subject line made me read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. IID, a Design Excellence Award, official nomination. I opened it with trembling fingers. Dear Ms. Mercer, we are pleased to inform you that you have been nominated for the Interior Design Association's Award for Design Excellence in recognition of your work on the Meridian Hotel Collection. The award ceremony will take place on March 15th at the Grand Hyatt, New York, and will be broadcast live via television and online streaming platforms. I read the rest of the email in a daze. The Meridian Project, 4 boutique hotels across the Midwest, each one designed to reflect the unique character of its city. 2 years of my life, countless sleepless nights, a team of brilliant people who'd trusted my vision. And now, this. I called Eleanor immediately. I just got the email, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm nominated. I know. I could hear her smiling through the phone. I told you, your stage is coming. Eleanor, I don't know if I can. You can, she interrupted gently. And Iris? If you win, I'll be the one introducing you on stage. That's already been arranged. I hung up and sat in my chair for a long time, staring out the window at the Chicago skyline. The ceremony would be broadcast live, hundreds of thousands of people watching, industry leaders, journalists, everyone who mattered in my field. I thought about the USB drive in my desk drawer, about the emails I'd never responded to, about my father, probably sitting in his country club right now, telling someone new that his daughter was too unstable to hold down a job. For the first time, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I just needed to wait for the right moment. 1 week before the ceremony, I was in my apartment, standing in front of a full-length mirror, wearing the dress. It was emerald green, custom-made by a designer friend who'd owed me a favor. Off the shoulder, beaded along the neckline, the kind of dress that made you feel like you could conquer the world. I'd paired it with red-soled Louboutins that I'd saved 3 months to afford. I had 2 speeches prepared. One was standard, grateful, professional, humble. The kind of speech you'd expect from any award winner. The other was different. My phone buzzed. Derek's name appeared on the screen. I frowned. He hadn't texted me in almost a year. Iris, I just found out you're nominated for a big award. Congratulations, that's amazing. I was about to type a simple thank you when another message came through. I need to tell you something. Dad is hosting a watch party for the ceremony at the house. He invited all his business friends and golf buddies. He doesn't know you're nominated. None of them do. I stared at the screen. Why is he watching an interior design awards ceremony? I typed back. One of his clients sponsored it. He thinks it'll be good networking to discuss it with them. Iris, he's going to be watching live, with everyone he's spent 10 years lying to about you. I sat down slowly on the edge of my bed. All of them. Every person he'd told that I was mentally unstable. Every friend he'd convinced that I couldn't function in society. They'd all be sitting in his living room, watching television together, when my name was called. If I won, if I chose to use that stage the way I'd been thinking about using it. One more message from Derek. Whatever you're going to do, I think it's time. I didn't reply. I just looked at myself in the mirror, the dress, the shoes, the woman I'd built myself into over 10 years of silence, and I smiled. This is the point where I want to pause for a moment. If you've been following along this far, You've walked with me through 10 years of silence. Thank you for that. Before I tell you what happened when I stepped onto that stage, I'm curious. What would you say if you were in my position? Drop your answer in the comments. I'd genuinely love to know how you'd handle this. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now might be the time. Because what comes next, you won't want to miss. The Grand Hyatt Ballroom was even more spectacular than I'd imagined. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from 40-foot ceilings. Tables draped in white linen stretched across the room, each one filled with the most influential people in my industry. 500 guests in total. Designers, architects, executives, journalists. And beyond this room, hundreds of thousands more watching from their living rooms, their offices, their phones. Including my father. I stood backstage, my emerald dress catching the light every time I moved. Through a gap in the curtain, I could see the stage, a massive screen displaying the IIDA logo, a sleek podium where winners would accept their awards, and row after row of expectant faces. Nervous? I turned. Eleanor was beside me, resplendent in silver that matched her hair. Terrified, I admitted. She took my hand. Remember what I told you years ago? The truth doesn't need you to scream. It just needs you to live it. She squeezed my fingers. Whatever you decide to say up there, Iris, I'm proud of you. Not because of this award. Because of who you've become. I hugged her, carefully so as not to wrinkle either of our dresses. A producer with a headset approached us. Ms. Mercer, you're one of the favorites tonight. Be ready. The Design Excellence category is up in 15 minutes. I nodded, my throat suddenly dry. When he walked away, Eleanor leaned close. I've known about your father for years, she said quietly. I never said anything because it wasn't my story to tell. But I want you to know. Whatever you say on that stage, I'll be standing right behind you. The lights in the ballroom dimmed. The ceremony was beginning. I touched the folded paper in my clutch. The speech I'd written at 3 a.m, the words I'd waited a decade to say. It was almost time. And now, the award for Design Excellence in Commercial Interior Design. I watched from backstage as the presenter, a famous architect whose work I'd admired for years, approached the podium with a gold envelope in his hand. This year's nominees represent the very best our industry has to offer. Their work pushes boundaries, challenges conventions, and transforms spaces into experiences. He read off the nominees. 4 names. Mine was last. And the winner is... The room went silent. 500 people held their breath. Somewhere in Connecticut, my father was probably on his second scotch, making small talk with business partners about networking opportunities, completely unaware that his daughter's name was about to fill the screen. The presenter opened the envelope, smiled. Iris Mercer, for the Meridian Hotel Collection. The ballroom erupted. I don't remember the first few seconds. Just noise, applause, music, Eleanor's hands pushing me gently forward. Then I was walking. 1 foot in front of the other, emerald silk swishing against my legs, the spotlight following me like a living thing. I climbed the stairs to the stage. The presenter handed me the award, a sculpture of crystal and silver, heavier than I expected. I stepped to the podium, looked out at 500 faces, all watching me, all waiting, and somewhere through cameras and cables and satellites, my father was watching too. I could picture it perfectly. His living room, the big screen TV, 6 or 7 men in polo shirts and khakis, drinks in hand. My father in his favorite armchair, probably mid-sentence about some construction deal, and then my face appearing on the screen. I imagined the exact moment he'd realize. The blood draining from his face, the glass frozen halfway to his lips, his friends turning to look at him. Isn't that your daughter, Howard? The one you said was mentally unstable? I gripped the podium, looked directly into the camera, and I began to speak. Thank you to the IIDA. Thank you to my incredible team who brought this vision to life. And thank you to my mentor, Eleanor Vance, who believed in me when I had nothing. I paused, let the applause die down. But there's something else I need to say. The ballroom went completely still. 500 people stared up at me. The red light on the camera blinked steadily. Hundreds of thousands more were watching from their homes, their phones, their offices. I took a breath. I want to thank everyone who believed in me over the past 10 years, I said. Everyone who gave me a chance. Everyone who looked at my work and saw potential instead of making assumptions about who I was. I reached into my clutch and pulled out the folded paper. I want to thank all of you, because my own father spent those same 10 years telling everyone who would listen that I was mentally unstable, that I couldn't hold down a job, that I was a burden to my family who refused treatment. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I saw confused glances, raised eyebrows. I kept going. For 10 years, I stayed silent. Not because I was ashamed, but because I knew that words alone wouldn't be enough. I knew I needed proof. Proof that he was wrong about me. Proof that I was capable of building a life on my own terms. I unfolded the paper. This is an email my father sent me 10 years ago, when I asked him to help pay for my education, the same education he'd already fully funded for my brother. I want to read it to you exactly as he wrote it. The ballroom was silent. I could hear my own heartbeat. Iris, you were born a girl. That is reality. You don't have the right to demand what belongs to your brother. Derek is the future of this family. You are just something to be given away to another family. Don't contact me again unless you're ready to apologize for humiliating me in front of everyone. I folded the paper and looked up. I didn't apologize. I left. And from that day forward, my father told everyone I was mentally ill to explain why his daughter had disappeared from his life. I looked directly into the camera. Dad, if you're watching, and I know you are, this is my answer. I'm not unstable. I'm not broken. I'm not a burden. I'm standing on this stage because I earned it. And the only thing wrong with me was that I was born a girl in a family that believed girls weren't worth investing in. I held up the crystal award. This isn't revenge. This is just the truth. And the truth doesn't need me to scream, it just needed me to live it. The first person to stand was Eleanor, then another, then another. Within seconds the entire ballroom was on its feet, applause thundering through the room. And somewhere in Connecticut, I knew my father's phone was starting to ring. I don't remember walking off the stage. I remember Eleanor catching me the moment I stepped behind the curtain, her arms wrapping around me so tightly I could barely breathe. I remember her saying, "You did it. You did it, Iris," over and over. I remember my phone, silenced for the ceremony, lighting up with notification after notification after notification, messages flooding in so fast the screen couldn't keep up. I remember a producer approaching us with wide eyes. "Ms. Mercer, the clip is already going viral. We're getting inquiries from news outlets. Do you want to?" "No interviews," I said. My voice was steadier than I expected. What I said on stage is everything I have to say. I don't want to talk about my father anymore. I want to talk about my work. The producer nodded and disappeared. Back in the ballroom, I could hear the ceremony continuing. The next category being announced, polite applause. But the energy had shifted. People kept glancing toward the backstage area. Phones were out everywhere, screens glowing blue in the dim light. Within 30 minutes, the clip had 100,000 views. Eleanor showed me on her tablet, scrolling through the comments. Thousands of people sharing their own stories. Thousands more tagging friends and family. The hashtag Iris Mercer was climbing the trending charts. "You should see what's happening on Twitter," someone from my team said, breathless. "It's everywhere." But I wasn't thinking about Twitter. I was thinking about a living room in Connecticut. About a man in an armchair surrounded by his golf buddies and business partners, the same people he'd spent a decade lying to about his mentally unstable daughter. I imagined Richard Calloway turning to my father with confusion on his face. "Howard, that's your daughter? The one you said couldn't hold down a job? She just won the biggest award in her industry." I imagined my father's phone ringing, and ringing, and ringing. For the first time in 10 years, I wasn't the one who needed to explain herself. 48 hours later, the video had 3 million views. I watched the number climb from my apartment in Chicago, curtains drawn, phone on silent. Every news outlet in the country wanted an interview. Every morning show wanted me on their couch. My inbox was so flooded that my assistant had to create a separate folder just to manage the media requests. I said no to all of them. The speech said everything I needed to say, I told my publicist. I don't want to become known for my family drama. I want to be known for my work. The articles wrote themselves anyway. Award-winning designer exposes father's decade of lies on live TV. Iris Mercer's acceptance speech goes viral. The truth doesn't need me to scream. The email that started it all, inside one woman's 10-year journey to justice. The comments sections were overwhelming. Thousands of people sharing their own stories of being dismissed, diminished, disbelieved by their families. Thousands more tagging their own fathers, their own mothers, their own siblings who'd said they'd never amount to anything. I'd become a symbol of something I hadn't intended to represent. On the second day, I started getting messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. Relatives who'd cut me off, family friends who'd believed my father's lies, former colleagues who'd been warned to stay away from me. The apologies came in waves. Iris, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I should have questioned what Howard told me. I feel terrible. All these years I thought you were struggling. I should have reached out. I never should have believed him. Can you ever forgive me? I read every single one. I didn't respond to most of them. But one message stood out. From an email address I'd almost forgotten. Robert Chen. The developer who'd pulled the contract 5 years ago. The one my father had sabotaged. Iris, I owe you more than an apology. I owe you an explanation and a conversation, if you're willing. I stared at his message for a long time. Then I wrote back. I'm listening. I didn't witness what happened at the country club. Derek told me about it later. 1 week after the ceremony, Richard Calloway, my father's closest friend of 20 years, requested a meeting. Not at my father's office, not at his home, at the Waverly Country Club, in the private dining room where deals were made and reputations were either built or destroyed. 4 men were waiting when my father arrived. Richard, James Monroe, David Foster, Tom Patterson, Amanda's father, now my brother's father-in-law. All of them had been at the watch party the night my speech aired. All of them had spent years hearing my father's stories about his tragic mentally ill daughter. Sit down, Howard, Richard said. His voice was cold. My father sat. According to Derek, who heard about it from Richard himself, my father tried to control the narrative from the first moment. Before you say anything, my father said, you need to understand. That speech was taken out of context. The email she read was from a very difficult time. She's twisting everything to Howard. Richard held up his phone. On the screen was a screenshot of a text message. You sent me this 3 years ago. I'm going to read it to you. Don't bother with Iris. She's unstable, can't keep a job, and the family has tried everything. Just pray for her. My father's face went pale. And this one, Richard continued, swiping to another screenshot. You sent to the entire group chat after she left. Please don't contact Iris directly. She's in a fragile mental state and any stimulation could set her off. We've consulted specialists. It's very serious. You lied to us, David Foster said quietly. For 10 years. She was on live television, Howard, Tom Patterson added. I watched her accept that award. She's not mentally ill. She's accomplished, successful. Everything you said was the opposite of true. Why would you do that to your own daughter? My father, Derek said, had no answer. For the first time in his life, Howard Mercer had nothing to say. The meeting ended with handshakes and tight smiles, but the message was clear. The men who had trusted him for decades now saw him differently. And that was just the beginning. My mother called me on a Sunday morning, 2 weeks after the ceremony. I was sitting on my couch with a cup of coffee, watching the sunrise over Lake Michigan. My phone rang with her name on the screen. But something was different. She wasn't whispering. She wasn't waiting for my father to leave. Iris, she said when I answered. I watched your speech. I know, Mom. I watched it 17 times. Her voice cracked. I watched you stand up there and tell the truth that I was too afraid to tell for 35 years. And I am so, so proud of you. I felt tears prick my eyes. Mom. Your father hasn't spoken to me in a week, she continued. He blamed me, of course. Said I must have given you those emails, must have helped you plan this whole thing. He screamed at me for 3 hours straight the night after it happened. My grip tightened on the phone. Are you okay? Are you safe? I'm more than okay. And for the first time, I heard something new in my mother's voice, something I'd never heard before. Strength. "I've contacted a lawyer," she said. "I'm filing for legal separation. After 36 years, I'm finally doing what I should have done when he kicked you out of this house." Mom. I couldn't find words. "I know it's too late to fix what happened to you. I know I failed you as a mother, but I'm 59 years old, and I just realized I've never made a single decision for myself in my entire adult life. I'm not going to die like this, Iris. I'm not going to let the last chapter of my story be about being too afraid to leave." We were both crying by then. "I'm proud of you too, Mom," I whispered. "I'm starting therapy next week," she said. "First time ever, and I got a part-time job at a gallery downtown. It doesn't pay much, but it's mine." "It's yours," I repeated. "That's what matters." Derek and I had our first real conversation a month after the ceremony. Not a text message, not a brief exchange at a family event where he was too nervous to say more than a few words. An actual conversation, face-to-face, over video call. He looked older than I remembered, tired. But his eyes were clearer somehow, like he'd stopped hiding from something. "I need to say something," he started, "and I need you to let me finish before you respond." I nodded. "I knew what Dad was saying about you was wrong. I've known for years. I heard him tell those stories at dinner parties, at golf outings, to anyone who asked about you, and I never said a word." He took a shaky breath. "Because saying something would have meant admitting that I benefited from your suffering, that everything I had, the tuition, the car, the easy path, came at your expense. I didn't want to face that." "Derek, let me finish." His voice cracked. "I was a coward, Iris. I was a coward, and I'm sorry. I can't undo the past decade. I can't give you back the years you struggled alone. But I can promise you that I'm going to be better. Not just in words, in actions." I sat with that for a moment. "I appreciate you saying that," I finally said. "But you're right, words aren't enough. I need to see what better looks like before I can trust it." "I understand." He paused. "I've started seeing a therapist, for the first time in my life. She's helping me understand that Dad didn't just hurt you. He hurt me too, in different ways. The pressure to be perfect. The conditional love. The way I was taught that my worth depended on being the good child. That doesn't excuse what you didn't do." "No, it doesn't." He met my eyes through the screen. "But it helps me understand why I was so afraid to do it." I nodded slowly. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a start. "One more thing," Derek said. "Amanda's pregnant. We're having a girl." He swallowed hard. "I'm going to make sure she never, ever feels the way Dad made you feel. That's a promise I'm making to myself. And to you." 1 month after the ceremony, an email from my father appeared in my inbox. I stared at the sender's name for a long time before I opened it. Howard Mercer. The first direct communication from him in 10 years, since the email I'd read on national television. I clicked. "Iris, what you did at that award ceremony was a betrayal of this family that I will never forgive. You took private matters and displayed them for the entire world to see, purely to humiliate me. You have damaged my reputation, my business relationships, and the Mercer family name. A name that I built over 40 years of hard work. I don't know who put you up to this, or what you hope to gain. But you need to understand. Everything I said about you was for your own protection. I was trying to manage a difficult situation in the best way I knew how. The fact that you've twisted that into some kind of public revenge fantasy tells me that you are still as unstable as you've always been. I expect a public retraction. I expect you to make a statement clarifying that you exaggerated and took my words out of context. If you do this, we can discuss moving forward as a family. Your father, Howard Mercer, CEO, Mercer Construction." I read it twice. Then I wrote my response. "Dad, this is the last email I will ever send you. I didn't humiliate you. You spent 10 years humiliating yourself by lying about your own daughter. I simply told the truth. If the truth embarrasses you, that's not my problem to solve. I will not be issuing a retraction because there is nothing to retract. Every word I said was accurate. I have the receipts to prove it. You had 10 years to apologize. You had 10 years to call me, reach out, admit that what you did was wrong. Instead, you doubled down on the lie, every single time. I don't hate you. I don't wish you harm. But I also don't owe you anything. Not an explanation, not a retraction, and certainly not my silence. This chapter is closed. Please don't contact me again. Iris. I hit send. Then I blocked his email address, his phone number, and every other way he might try to reach me. Derek told me later that my father forwarded my response to several friends, accompanied by his own commentary about how unhinged I still was. But this time, no one agreed with him. The truth had spoken, and it didn't need me anymore. I know a lot of you are waiting to see if my father ever apologized. I used to wait for that too. I spent years believing that if he would just say sorry, I could finally heal. But I learned something important. My healing was never dependent on his apology. It couldn't be. Because some people will never admit they were wrong, and I couldn't put my peace in their hands. If you're waiting for someone to change before you let yourself move on, I hope this part of my story gives you permission to stop waiting. And if this resonates, share it with someone who needs to hear it. 3 months after the ceremony, I took stock of what had changed. The numbers were concrete now. Measurable. The kind of consequences that couldn't be explained away or spun into another narrative. 2 major contracts had quietly dissolved for Mercer Construction. Partners who had worked with my father for over a decade suddenly found reasons to explore other options. The combined value, according to industry estimates, was somewhere around $850,000. The charitable organization where my father had sat on the board for 15 years released a carefully worded press statement about restructuring their leadership. His name was notably absent from the new board list. The Waverly Country Club, his second home for 25 years, still technically allowed him membership. But Derek told me my father had stopped going. The atmosphere had changed, he said. Old friends crossed to the other side of the dining room when they saw him coming. Golf invitations stopped arriving. And at Mercer Construction itself, something subtle but significant had shifted. The board of directors, people who had trusted my father's judgment implicitly for decades, began routing major decisions through Derek instead. My father was still technically CEO, but he was being slowly, quietly, pushed to the margins. None of this was because of legal action or formal consequences. It was simply what happened when a community discovered that one of their most respected members had been lying about his own daughter for a decade. Trust, once broken, doesn't rebuild easily. I didn't celebrate these developments. I didn't feel vindicated watching my father's world shrink. Mostly, I felt tired. Tired of a story I'd never wanted to be part of in the first place. I'd spent 10 years building a career to prove I wasn't what he said I was. Now I wanted to spend the rest of my life just being myself. The award sat on a shelf in my office. I rarely looked at it. The speech had served its purpose. It was time to move on. 1 year later, I became a partner at the firm. The promotion came not because of the viral speech or the media attention, both of which I'd worked hard to distance myself from, but because of the work I'd done in the 12 months since. 3 new hotel projects. A renovation of a historic theater that made the cover of Architectural Digest. A reputation built on talent, not trauma. My new office had a view of Lake Michigan. Floor-to-ceiling windows. My name etched on the glass door. Iris Mercer, partner. On my first day in that office, I hung 2 things on the wall. The first was the IIDA award. Not prominently, just on a shelf near the window where the light caught the crystal. The second was a small painting Eleanor had given me when she retired the month before. It was a watercolor of Chicago's skyline at sunset. On the back she'd written, "For Iris, who walked the whole way on her own 2 feet. With love, Eleanor." I'd started a mentorship program for young designers from difficult backgrounds. Once a month, I met with students who were working their way through school the way I had, scholarships and loans and part-time jobs, families that didn't support them, dreams they were told were too big. You don't have to come from the right family to build the right career, I told them. You just have to be willing to outwork everyone who doubted you. I didn't talk about my father in these sessions. I didn't tell them my story. I just showed them what was possible. The interview requests still came occasionally. Book deals, podcast appearances. Tell us about the speech that went viral. I declined them all. I'm not interested in being famous for my family's failures, I told my publicist. I want to be known for my own success. She understood. Everyone did, eventually. Iris Mercer, partner, designer, mentor. Not Iris Mercer, the woman who called out her father on live television. That was the victory I'd really been working toward all along. I visited my mother for the first time since leaving home on a warm Saturday in September. Her new apartment was nothing like the house I'd grown up in. No crystal chandeliers, no imported furniture, no evidence of my father anywhere. It was small, just one bedroom, a galley kitchen, a living room with windows that looked out onto a quiet street. But it was hers. Really, truly hers. I decorated it myself, she said, a little nervously, as she showed me around. I know it's not much, but it's beautiful, Mom. And it was. Plants everywhere, pothos trailing down bookshelves, a fiddle-leaf fig in the corner, succulents lining the windowsills, art on the walls that she'd picked out, not my father, photographs in frames, including one of me at my college graduation, an event my father had refused to attend. I started that part-time job at the gallery I told you about, she said, pouring us both tea. It's not much money, but the owner is teaching me about art history. I never knew I'd enjoy learning so much at my age. It's never too late to start, I said. She smiled. A real smile, not the strained, performative one I'd seen for years at family dinners. My therapist says the same thing. Did I tell you I'm in therapy now? First time in my life. You mentioned it. How is it? Hard. She wrapped her hands around her teacup. I'm learning that I spent 36 years being afraid. Afraid of your father, afraid of conflict, afraid of being alone. I'm 59 years old, and I'm just now figuring out who I am. I reached across the table and took her hand. That's not a failure, Mom. That's brave. Her eyes filled with tears. I should have been brave for you, Iris. When you were 22 and he threw you out, I should have... You're being brave now, I said gently. That's what matters. We sat together in her small, warm apartment, drinking tea and talking about nothing important. And for the first time in my adult life, I felt like I had a mother again. I haven't spoken to my father since I sent that final email. Through Derek, I hear fragments of his life now. The picture isn't pretty. He still tells anyone who will listen that I betrayed him, that I was manipulated, that the email was taken out of context, that he was a good father who did everything right, and his ungrateful daughter destroyed his reputation for no reason. Fewer and fewer people listen. His circle has shrunk to a handful of acquaintances who either don't know the full story or don't care. The business partners who once sought his opinion now route their calls through Derek. The country club friends who once laughed at his jokes now remember prior engagements when he suggests getting together. My mother left him. His daughter doesn't speak to him. His son maintains a careful professional distance. By any measure, Howard Mercer is a diminished man. I don't feel happy about this. I don't feel vindicated. I don't feel much of anything, really. I spent so many years wanting him to acknowledge what he did, to apologize, to change. I've had to accept that none of that is coming. Some people never admit they were wrong. Some people go to their graves believing their own lies. My father, I think, will be one of those people. But here's what I've learned. My peace doesn't depend on his transformation. My healing doesn't require his apology. I wasted too many years waiting for him to become someone he's not. I've stopped waiting now. I hope, somewhere deep down, he finds his own peace someday. But whether he does or doesn't, it's no longer my concern. I have a life to live, and it's a good one. Derek and I see each other once a month now. He flies to Chicago for business, and we have dinner at a quiet restaurant near my apartment. We don't talk about our father much. We talk about work, about life, about the future. Mostly, we talk about his daughter. She was born 7 months after the ceremony, a baby girl with Derek's eyes and Amanda's stubborn chin. He named her Grace. I think about what you said a lot, Derek told me one evening, showing me photos on his phone. Grace in a onesie, Grace in a stroller, Grace sleeping in his arms with her tiny fist wrapped around his finger. What I said about what? About being better. About showing it through actions, not words. He swiped to another photo. Every time I hold her, I think about how Dad made you feel growing up, how he made you believe you were less than because you were a girl, and I promised myself I will never, ever do that to her. That's a good promise. I'm going to keep it. He looked up at me. I'm not doing it to earn your forgiveness, Iris. I know that might never come, and I understand why. I'm doing it because it's right, because I don't want to be the person I was. I looked at my little brother, not so little anymore, a father himself now, trying to break a cycle that had wounded both of us in different ways. I'm proud of you, I said, and I meant it. We don't have the relationship we might have had if things had been different. Too much time has passed, too much damage has been done, but we have something. It's not perfect, it's not what it could have been, but it's ours. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, I stand at the window of my office and watch the sun set over Chicago. The skyline turns gold, then orange, then deep purple. The lake reflects the light like a mirror. On my shelf, the IIDA award catches the last rays of daylight, crystal glinting. On the wall behind me, Eleanor's painting. On my desk, a photograph of my mentees from last year's cohort, 12 young designers who are now building careers of their own. And somewhere in my memory, always, a 22-year-old girl standing in the rain with a torn suitcase and $47 in her pocket. I don't hate that girl anymore. For years I was ashamed of her, ashamed that she'd needed help, ashamed that she'd asked, ashamed that she'd been rejected so brutally. But now I understand. She survived, she endured. She built something from nothing. She became me. My father said I was worthless. He said I would never amount to anything. He said that being born a girl made me less valuable than my brother, less worthy of investment, less deserving of support. He was wrong. Not because I proved him wrong, though I did, but because he was wrong from the beginning. I was always worthy. I was always enough. The only thing that changed was that I finally believed it. If you're listening to this story and you recognize any part of it, if you've ever been told you weren't good enough, if you've ever been lied about by people who were supposed to love you, if you've ever wondered whether you should keep fighting, I want you to know something. Your worth is not determined by people who refuse to see it. Your healing does not depend on apologies that may never come. And your success is not about proving anyone wrong. It's about proving yourself right. That's what I learned. That's what I hope you take away from this. Thank you for listening to my story. If it meant something to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Like and subscribe if you want to hear more, and leave me a comment. Tell me your story. I'm always listening. I'll see you in the next one.